Welcome to Weasel Gaming, and today we're going to be going over the Sun and Moon Burning Shadows Rock Steady theme deck, featuring, of course, Lycanroc. I've already swapped in this reverse hollow Lycanroc that I had for the damaged Lycanroc that I received. So this deck, being Sun and Moon, does have 20 energy. It is split. There is 14 fighting energy, and there is six psychic energy. Can't talk at all. So you do have a little bit of a split there with the Pokemon. There are some psychic, a lot of fighting, a little bit of colorless. Now, fighting decks tend to punch up a little bit. They tend to have fairly high damage numbers. This one is no different. It would have been a fairly heavy hitter in Sun and Moon days. In Sword and Shield days, it's not quite as impressive, but it's still, I think, competitive. I certainly wouldn't give you the edge against any Sun and Moon, or against any Sword and Shield deck. But it's not a horrible deck. If you have this, it's certainly playable as a theme deck still. So we'll get right into our starters. First up for our starters is Sock. Sock has 90 health as a fighting type. Sock has a 1 energy quick guard, prevents all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from basic Pokemons during your opponent's next turn. This Pokemon can't use quick guard twice. And then a 2 energy brick break that does 40 damage, and it's not affected by resistance. Not a real powerful Pokemon. Not going to be doing a whole lot of damage for you, but if that's what you have in your hand, not a bad way to start. Throw a couple energy, start doing some damage right away. Use Quick Guard to protect yourself if you need to. Soul Rock is a much better option, and you do have 2 Soul Rocks in the deck. Soul Rock has an ability called Double Draw. For 1 energy, you get to draw 2 cards. That's really useful. Start cycling through your deck as quick as possible. Get the cards you want. Start setting stuff up on your bench. Also has Solar Heat, which does 20 damage, plus 20 more if you have a Stadium in play. And you do have a Stadium in this deck. A little odd for theme decks to have Stadiums, but this is one of them that does, so Solar Heat gets a little boost there. Could have a 1 energy 40 damage attack. Next up, we have Esper and Meowstic. If you happen to have both of these in your hand, and hopefully a psychic energy, you have a pretty decent little starter here. Esper's not too impressive. 60 health, psychic type, has a 1 energy perplexing eyes. Defending Pokemon's weakness is now psychic until the end of your next turn. If, however, you have Meowstic, and you can evolve to Meowstic the following turn, and you can get the energy on him, Hand Kinesis could end up doing a lot of damage. Because you've just made them weak to Psychic. Now you're going to do double damage. If you have 5 cards in your hand, that's a 100 damage attack against someone that's weak to that Psychic. Now, after that one turn, your damage is going to fall back down to just 50 for a 5-card hand. But that's still not bad. Meowstic has 90 health, psychic type, has a 1 energy allure, which allows you to draw 3 cards, which is pretty nice if you're not under any kind of threat or you have a really small hand, and has a 2 energy Hand Kinesis that does 10 damage times the number of cards in your hand. Meowstic can be fairly good early on, when you may have 4 or 5 cards in your hand, and you're going against those basic Pokemon. That's pretty effective. Can really be effective later on if you're having a problem keeping your hand empty, which can happen in theme deck play a lot. You know, you got 8, 9, 10 cards or more, you can start doing 80, 90, 100 damage or more. So it is a possibility that Meowstic can be one of your heavier hitters too. That's really it for our starters. We don't have a lot of great options there. For defense, We again have Sock, which we talked about with the Quick Guard. Remember, that only works for one turn. Then he's vulnerable again, and then it can work for another turn. But it's something to keep in mind. We have Buffalont, who has Buffalont Head for 30 damage, 2 energy. During your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 30 less damage from attacks. So you do 30 damage and prevent 30 damage. For 3 energy, you can also do a knockover attack for 80 damage. Then, also for defense, we have Lucario. Lucario has 120 health, is a fighting type. His ability Stance is pretty powerful. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may prevent all effects to your from your opponent's attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon until the end of your opponent's next turn. This is best to use when you have a Riolu on your bench with at least 2 energy. They knock out your active Pokemon. You play Lucario, or you put Riolu out there in the active spot, play Lucario on them. He's immune for a turn. You put that extra energy on, you do 120 damage. They can't do anything back to you the next turn. Then you can do another 120 damage. So Lucario is very powerful, kind of a defensive offensive play there, but it only works on the turn you evolve him. We'll be talking about some little tricks you can play with that later. So next up, we're going to talk about power. And we'll go ahead, we'll start with Riolu and Lucario. Riolu is, of course, not very impressive there with a top end of 30 damage on a 70 health hit point Pokemon. Not very good. Lucario can do 120, though, for 3 energy, which is pretty impressive. Has 120 health, fighting type. That one can go toe-to-toe with that kind of mid-range attacker in the Sword and Shield days. So, very powerful Pokemon there. However, you only have one Lucario. Next up is Rockruff and Lycanroc. Rockruff, not very impressive at all. You have Corner, which stops the opponent's Pokemon from retreating. You have Wild Kick that does 30 damage on a coin flip. Lycanroc, however, 110 health, has a 100 damage, 3 energy attack, Accelerock. Not amazing, but it's okay. It's dependable. We already mentioned Meowstic earlier, but depending on the size of your hand, Meowstic could be a pretty heavy damage dealer. So keep that in mind. Our big damage line, though, is our Rhyhorn line. So we have Rhyhorn with 80 health, fighting type, 2 energy, 20 damage lunge out, and a 3 energy, 60 damage horn drill. That's a pretty impressive 3 energy attack for a basic, 80 health, not bad. Evolves into Rhydon, though, 110 health, fighting type, has a 3 energy, 80 damage Rock Tumble. This attack's damage is not affected by resistance. Also has a 4 energy Mega Horn that does 120 damage. However, that's a coin flip. So it could do nothing, or it could do 120. Now you have 3 of each of those, but you only have 1 Rhyperior. Rhyperior has 160 health, which is very nice. Fighting type. Has a 4 energy Rock Wrecker that does 170 damage. That is impressive. That is a threat to almost everything in Theme Deck play. There are a couple Pokemon that just eke out past that 170 mark. That'll be a little bit harder to knock out with Rhyperior, but very powerful. And Rhyperior also has an ability called Toppling Wind. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's Pokemon. Again, this is a Pokemon that's going to play a big part of what you're doing, just like Lucario is. And again, I'm going to be talking about some tricks later that you can do with Rhyperior. So that's it for our Pokemon. We do have a couple mid-range hitters, a couple heavy hitters, a little bit of defense in there, and some less than stellar but okay starters. Next up, we're going to take a look at our trainers. And with that, we always start with our draws. And in this deck, we have 3 Hows. How allows you to draw 3 cards. We also have Professor Kukui. We have 2 of these. Kukui allows you to draw 2 cards and adds 20 damage to your attack. It's sometimes beneficial to save this card for that bonus damage over just doing draws. However, in this deck, you have some fairly heavy hitters, so you don't have to necessarily save Kukui. If you need draws to get your deck moving, go ahead and use them. Don't forget you also have Solrock and Meowstic that can do draws too in an early or mid-range game. If you just need some quick draws, they're possible. Next up, we're going to talk about pulling Pokemon, and that can be from the deck, from the discard, from wherever. We have 2 Nest Balls. Nest Balls allow you to search your deck for a basic Pokemon. There's not a lot of great options here for basic Pokemon, so you're pretty much going to be using this to either build to those higher ranking Pokemon. You're going to get a Riolu because you have a Lucario in your hand, or you're going to get the Rhyhorn because you want to evolve them up to a Rhydon or a Rhyperior. Buffalont's really the only basic that you maybe want to pull out at some specific time. However, I kind of doubt it. He's not that great. So we do have 2 Timer Balls. Now this is going to be used to get those evolutions. This is going to be used to pull Rhydon and Rhyperior or Lucario, or even Meowstic in certain situations. So that's where Timer Ball is going to be useful for us. We also have Brooklet Hill. Once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a basic water Pokemon or a basic fighting Pokemon and put it on their bench, then shuffle their deck. So that's a nice way to get some basics down. If you get this early on, it can be pretty helpful to you. Mid to late game, it's really not a big use for you. And you want to be careful if you're going against another fighting deck or water deck, because you might be giving them some kind of advantage with them being able to draw the cards they want. So make sure you're really going to get something out of it before you just play it. This deck also has a Rescue Stretcher. This allows you to put 1 Pokemon from your discard pile into your hand, or shuffle 3 Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck. This is best used for Rhyperior or Lucario. So if you have the other Riolu on your bench, or you have another Rhydon on your bench ready to go, then you lose Lucario or Rhyperior, using that Rescue Stretcher to pull them back out of the discard can be extremely helpful, because you can evolve them and get them right back into the action right away. Don't forget about their abilities too. Rhyperior's ability to do Toppling Wind, which allows you to discard 3 cards from the opponent's deck, or Lucario's Stance. So in the case they get knocked out, you can Rescue Stretcher them back into play, and they reuse those abilities. Next up, we're looking at Energy Manipulation. For that, we don't have a whole lot. We do have 1 Energy Retrieval, which allows you to grab 2 basic energy from your discard pile. And we have 1 Wishful Baton. Now, Wishful Baton can be very useful in this deck because there are a lot of high energy Pokemon. Rhyhorn, Rhydon, Rhyperior take a lot of energy. Lycanroc takes a little bit of energy. Lucario takes a little bit of energy. So there is a good argument to be made to pass this energy around. Keep that one in mind. Next up is our heals, and we do have 1 potion, which heals 30 damage. We also have an Acerola. Acerola allows you to put 1 Pokemon that has any damage counters on it, and all the cards attached to it, into your hand. This, again, can be used very well with Lucario or Rhyperior, especially if you already have a Riolu and a Rhydon on your bench ready to go. You have your Rhyperior out there in the active spot, or Lucario out there in the active spot. You know, especially, Rhyperior can only use Rock Wrecker every other turn. You could use Acerola to pull those back in your hands and then instantly turn around and play that Rhyperior or Lucario on the waiting Pokemon on your bench that's ready to go. So it's a good way to transfer that stuff around. It's a good way to let Rhyperior make multiple Rock Wrecker attacks in multiple turns. And if you use Acerola along with the Rescue Stretcher to the maximum effect, you can actually deploy Lucario or Rhyperior a total of 3 times in the match. And that's pretty powerful. If you do that 3 times for Rhyperior, you're going to discard 9 cards from their deck. That's 1/6 of their deck. A good chance you're going to be discarding something relatively powerful that they're not going to want to lose in those 9 cards. It also gets them closer to decking out. For Lucario, each time you deploy Lucario, he becomes immune for 1 turn. So that's 3 turns there where you're not taking damage. And Lucario does 120 damage a turn, which isn't half bad. Next up, we have our utilities, our manipulation cards. The only thing we have here is the Escape Rope. Escape Rope acts as a switch for you and your opponent. Your opponent has to switch their Pokemon, you have to switch yours. Best case use for this is pulling Rhyperior out of your active spot, putting in someone that has a cheap retreat, such as a Meowstic, Esper, Riolu, Rockruff, Solrock, the list goes on. Having them then retreat, that gets you Rhyperior right back out to the active spot where he can do another 170 damage attack. So Escape Rope is best used to maximize Rhyperior's Rock Wrecker damage. So, quick and dirty, that was the deck. That's the cards we have to work with. Some fairly good heavy hitters. And then some ways to kind of manipulate those cards around to get the most out of them. With that, let's go look at our stats. This deck has a power rating of 3. Sure, Rhyperior can hit really hard at 170, but he can only do it every other turn, and you don't have a lot of switch mechanics. Now, you do have some ways that, if he gets injured and you have the right card, or he gets knocked out and you have the right card set up, you might be able to get him back into action to where he can start doing damage again. But otherwise, there's a lot of your damage is riding on Rhyperior, and you can only do it every other turn. Next up is our speed, which is sitting at a 3. Fighting decks can do fairly good damage. However, they tend to be slow to deploy because that damage requires a lot of energy. And that's the case here. Rhyperior would be 2 evolutions and 4 energy. Lycanroc would be a single evolution and 3 energy to do 100 damage. Lucario is 3 energy and an evolution. So it is kind of slow to get these guys out of the gates and out there doing damage initially. Agility is your ability to switch between Pokemon, to have other Pokemon sitting on your bench ready to go, and that's sitting at a 3, just kind of average down the line. You don't have a lot of switches to move people in and out, but you have some okay retreat costs, some okay Pokemon pulling abilities and cards. So, sitting at a 3. Energy efficiency is sitting at a 3. You have a little bit of energy manipulation to do, and you are kind of on the higher end of energy use for the Pokemon because you got a lot of 3s and some 4s. But that's the way it goes. Complexity of this deck is sitting at a 2. Your biggest complexity is your use of Escape Rope, Acerola, and Rescue Stretcher to keep your big heavy hitters in play at the right time. Resiliency is sitting at a 3. Your Lycanrocs have 110 health, Lucario has 120, Rhyperior has 160. You do have some hit points to depend on. Lucario has a little bit of defense in there also with his ability. You do have some other Pokemon with some defense. So resiliency is sitting at a 3. Type advantage is sitting at a 3 also. You have fighting, psychic, and colorless in this deck. You're weak to grass, to psychic, to fighting. Luckily you can kind of bounce around a little bit. Lucario is weak to Psychic. Rhyperior and Lycanroc are weak to Grass. So you can maneuver around a little bit, but not a whole heck of a lot. And then, of course, your manipulation is sitting at a 1 with just that escape rope. So, with all of that, I hope you feel more comfortable about this deck. It's certainly not the best fighting deck. It's certainly not the most competitive deck, but it is playable. If you're playing this against a Sword and Shield theme deck, I wouldn't say that you're automatically going to lose. It really depends on the cards that you draw and if you can get the deck moving and doing damage early enough. There's a lot of recovery ways to really play things in a strong way. With those Lycanroc defenses, those Rhyperior discards, things like that, you can really do some interesting stuff here. So it's not a half bad deck. With that, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.